I have this wholehearted belief that everybody is going to continuously be responsible for innovation and transformation. Let folks know that you're responsible for innovation. You have an opportunity here to really impact the way that this company is operating. Yeah. While at the same time, you shouldn't be scared to fail and, give you the opportunity to do things that's not going to make you scared to want to do new things in the organization. And to me, all of that comes down to influencing the culture from the bottom up, but leveraging the executive leadership team really to drive that, and then use everybody in the organization really to drive the culture of innovation and transformation. I'm Abel Travis from AF Group, and this is the future of insurance.
When a roof is damaged, insurance carriers face the question, how much should a roof actually cost to repair? Both contractors and insurance adjusters need to create an estimate they agree on, but they rely on outdated systems to find accurate information. These manual processes lead to wasted time and inaccurate estimates, all at the expense of the insurer and the homeowner. OneClickCode has unlocked an automated pathway to precise roofing estimates, giving insurance carriers the ability to settle claims quickly and at scale for the first time ever. OneClick is accepted and used by both contractors and insurance carriers with one common goal in mind: keeping their customers happy. With a simple API or click of a button on the platform, OneClick can save your adjusting team over 1 hour on every claim while ensuring accurate claims payments. It's a no-brainer. Download for free from the App Store for Android or iOS, or visit OneClickCode.com. That's OneClickCode.com.
Abel, it's great to sit down with you. It's been a while. We were saying before we recorded, last time, other than webinars and panels and stuff, was for your show 2 years ago, something like that. A while now. A little bit's changed in the world.
Yeah, Bryan, first, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you. It has been a little while, man. I was definitely excited when you and I had the opportunity to connect 2 years ago, and on a couple of the webinars that occurred over the last couple of years. And yeah, man, things have changed so significantly. There was that little thing called COVID that I think we remember that's still impacting us. But it's great to see you again. Great to talk to you again.
Yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing you in an office. So that's the point we're at again. Tell us a little bit about where you're at. What is it that you're doing, AF Group, but Fundamental in particular?
Yeah, no, definitely. So for those that don't know me, I'm Abel Travis. I'm the vice president and head of a brand and a subsidiary of AF Group called Fundamental Underwriters. So AF Group has been around for about 120 years. And if you don't know who AF Group is, they've been writing essentially workers' compensation for the last 120 years. So when we started Fundamental Underwriters back in 2018, that was the first time that we wrote an organic policy on our paper that's not workers' compensation. So with Fundamental, we are the organic diversification brand for AF Group, really focused on identifying those opportunities where there's a supply gap and a demand need, where we know we can fill that demand need through providing that supply with the capability that we're building. So, we launched back in 2018, as I mentioned. Our first policy was in the commercial trucking rank. So we launched a commercial auto liability and physical damage policy, started it about, 3 years ago or so. And we built that capability to about $60 million is where we landed. By the end of this year, we should be at about $100 million in terms of our size. We also looked at opportunities in health and human services, where we built out a primary non-owned auto capability that essentially allows us to support those businesses that have employees using their personal vehicles for business use. So we really look for innovative ways to transform the market, not only from an insurance perspective, but also from a service model perspective. And really to help us to serve the customer and partner with our agents and our brokers a little bit better. So, I mentioned supply gap and a demand need, right? AF Group has been doing comp for a long time. And, really the things that we look at really is to hone in on those things that have a lower correlation to workers' comp. So that way we don't get hit with some of those challenging market cycles, right? Commercial auto has a completely different correlation to the market cycle than workers' compensation does, right? And as we continue to look for new opportunities, that's sort of the strategy that we look after to make sure that we can balance overall volatility within the company. So that's what we do in Fundamental Underwriters and AF Group.
So I get diversification on the product side. Do you also look at that on the account side? So is it that you'll write outside of AF insureds, or is it just if you have comp from AF Group, then we'll talk about rounding out into other lines?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we have to do. Actually, is we really have to look at providing a capability that can be leveraged across the base of all of our customers, and also bringing in new customers. So, for example, even though AF Group has a significant transportation division, when we built out the commercial trucking capabilities, we went after those customers in order to support them, to offer sort of a package of the auto and the comp to those customers. But we also looked at other customers that didn't have a workers' compensation policy with AF Group at all.
Yeah.
And that was really to make sure that we can balance, again, what we already have within our portfolio with something new in support of bringing new customers into the organization and partnering with new agent and broker partners, through just the relationships that we've built in the organization.
I want to ask you about innovation, because
yeah.
what you're doing is it's innovative for AF Group for sure. It's about changing the loss picture and aggregation, like all the different things, like you're saying, the timing of the losses, the issues that you're facing in different lines. Definitely, it brings diversification there. But you're this innovation. I was going to say innovation god, but I was like, I don't want to put you on the spot. But headlining a lot of those top 50 lists and all that kind of stuff. You're someone the industry looks at as on the ball when it comes to innovation. How does that play into your role?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Brian. So even before I started leading the division, fundamental at AF Group, I actually came into the organization really leading innovation for the organization. But as I took on this bigger role of sort of running fundamental, I sort of put innovation off to the side.
Yeah.
And then we moved it into another organization in another team in the organization. I got to say, it actually still plays a significant role in what I do at AF Group, especially as we start to look at the future of where we need our organization to go. Right? I mentioned we've been around for just about 120 years, doing comp for a long time. And we can't necessarily just focus our attention on workers' compensation, because I don't believe that we'll be able to be around for another 120 years as a monoline player, right? Meaning that we have to look at those other capabilities that's not necessarily just focused on one line of business, but frankly, it goes even further than that. I think about where the customer of the future is actually going, and how we can build capabilities to serve that customer of the future, so that way we don't become irrelevant, right? So, think about it from the perspective of even if we look at workers' compensation or a multi-line carrier, and specifically what we're doing in AF Group is we have a significant base of what I would call small business customers.
Yeah.
And when you think about the way that things have changed for those small business customers, they, especially, over the last couple of years with the pandemic happening, a lot of those customers don't necessarily want to sit in an agent's office, for example. Some do, not all do. So that they don't want to sit in an agent's office to try to figure out whether or not they're going to be able to get their insurance, right? So a lot of them are actually being influenced by non-insurance organizations in this insurance space that we're working in. So there are things that they want to do, like, have the ability to go online very quickly, potentially get a quote. Now, it may be done in a non-manual way, right? It's sort of a digital way.
Yeah.
But the way that I see this playing out is, it may start in a digital environment. They may then have a question where they want to pick up the phone or send an email or something, but they then want to end that transaction in a digital environment. So digital, analog, back to digital is the way that it happens, right? So as I think about what we're doing in AF Group, I had the opportunity to spearhead our small business strategy, which really focused on our ability really to fashion our company into what we expect the insurance company of the future to be, based on where we think the customer of the future is going to wind up wanting to look at the capabilities and the products that we offer.
Yeah.
So it's not only on the distribution side, for example, but when you look at things like, okay, customers want to make things easy. They don't want to have to fill out a 30-page application, for example, right? So how do you streamline the ability for the customer to get the information from you through their agent, in order to be able to get their insurance, all the way through when we think about the servicing of insurance, right? So, think about an insurance portfolio where there could potentially be trends that's playing out, and, introducing new capabilities like artificial intelligence and cognitive capabilities to discern some of the trends that might be in our data. So that way we can better serve the customer, based on those trends that we're seeing, and let them know whether or not, hey, there's this trend that may be playing out in your policy. And you may want to do these things a little bit differently in order to mitigate the potential of injury to your employees, right? So all of those things really, in the organization, trying to influence the way that we engage with our customers and that we engage with our partners to make sure that we are going to be around for another 120 plus years, especially where things are going,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like people hear innovation and they're like, oh, it's tools, it's CX and it's cloud and APIs, and like it is, but you're also talking about business model and strategy.
Absolutely.
Like, do you get to look at it holistically like that?
Yeah, honestly, Brian, there's no other way around it. You have to look at it holistically. One of the things that I always say is that you can't sort of base transformation on the technology. You have to start with the business need, and you have to start with that business problem, right? Because you don't want to be a hammer that's looking for a nail, right? You want to make sure that you're starting with the business need, so that way you can figure out, okay, well, how do we then use these technology capabilities, these tools, to enable the business need that we have, right? So, for example, there could be issues within a portfolio, even within our own portfolio, where we say, oh my, there are these trends in manufacturing facilities, and this, maybe this specific type of manufacturing facilities where we're seeing lacerations or slip and falls. That's occurring and hitting the employees that's within those facilities. And meanwhile, the slip and falls could be coming from the fact that the temperature is at a level that causes a lot of humidity, which causes the floors in that particular facility to be a little bit slippery, right? So meaning that, that individual might wind up slipping and falling, and more than one individual, that's happening there, right? So, leveraging the data, to understand what some of the things that could potentially be happening in those classes of manufacturing or construction or whatever it might be, using data analytics and, cognitive trending, in order to help leverage, artificial intelligence, really to help us do those sorts of things that will then help us to improve the portfolio that we have. And that goes just beyond the tools. It goes in terms of identifying, okay, well, what's the business models that we need to be looking at in order to support that? And then what's the long-term need, that we need to ensure is in place in order to support longevity and how we're applying those capabilities within our organization. So it's really taking that holistic view of what we're doing and then applying it just across the board in our organization.
Abel, so you mentioned 120 years. And I know you've worked in the industry for almost 20. So you've seen other orgs, you've seen folks that are handcuffed, right? Like, oh, well, we would do this, but we can't, or we've got compliance or our systems or whatever. How do you do this and move the organization ahead? Like, how do you break through, especially like monoline history? You guys are part of a larger healthcare organization, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Like, there's all these reasons to say, oh, we can't because, but our scale is a benefit. So it's okay that we're slower, we're behind because we're so big and strong. How do you kind of overcome that negative inertia to be able to make that sort of change? Is it just because you're in a smaller part of the business that's meant to be doing different things, or can you do this more broadly?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually very imperative that it's actually done more broadly. And I got to tell you, part of this, overcoming sort of that negative inertia, I actually think is making sure that we really transform the culture of the organization and how people understand what's actually playing out within the organization. Because, I got to tell you, when I joined AF Group, I mentioned a little bit earlier, I used to lead innovation for our organization. Even as I joined, there were a lot of people that's never heard the word or the concept of what an insurtech is. Yeah. And as you know, especially as you look at 2018 and in some of the early days, there were a lot of insurtechs that were either looking to partner with those in the industry or transform, what's been occurring, long-term in this insurance industry, right? And it was just because, I don't think it had anything to do with the organization. I think it was just because that people weren't introduced to those new capabilities, those new things that were playing out in the old days of insurance. So what I wound up doing in our organization is really driving something called InsurTech Day, in which we brought in several InsurTechs early on into the organization so they can really talk about what they're doing, talk about what they're seeing in the industry, but really talk about what that's going to mean to our organization as well as the customers that we're serving in the future, right? Because people haven't necessarily had the opportunity to really understand, okay, well, now things have significantly shifted from a customer expectation perspective. If we don't move along with that shift, then we're not going to be here for the long term, right? So really focusing on, well, how do we make sure that we can support this shift in the industry and make sure that we are going to be here for another 120, 240 plus years, as a company that's been a sort of a one monoline organization for more than 115 of those particular years, right? So you really, Bryan, I really do wholeheartedly believe that it starts with the culture in an organization and really start to incrementally be sort of like a pickaxe and pick away at some of those things that can create negative inertia in the organization, really to change the culture. I think that the other thing that I would mention is, so for me, I'm on the executive leadership team of the organization, and people in companies tend to look at those executive leaders as doing exactly what they were brought into the organization to do, share their strategy, drive the strategy, share, where they think the future vision of the organization is going to be. But I do think that you have to have the executive leadership, those from the top, really driving this concept into the organization, really to ensure that the rest of the company buys into what we're looking to do. And then finally, Bryan, the one thing that I would say is, as a reminder, I have this wholehearted belief that everybody is going to continuously be responsible for innovation and transformation in your organization, right? The leadership and the company really has to drive the culture, but let folks know that you're responsible for innovation. You have an opportunity here to really impact the way that this company is operating. While at the same time, you shouldn't be scared to fail, in the event that you want to introduce something new, because we're going to embrace the things that you're introducing, and give you the opportunity to do things that's not going to make you scared to want to do new things in the organization, right? And to me, all of that comes down to influencing the culture from the bottom up, but leveraging the executive leadership team really to drive that, and then use everybody in the organization really to drive the culture of innovation and transformation in your company.
Yeah. I love that you point out failure and taking risks, because that's a lot of companies are doing things with lots of different associates at different levels, some more meaningfully than others. For some, it's like, oh yeah, we have to say that we're doing this, or like, yeah, we let our people do it, but we don't really do anything with it, or we only talk about the ones that won out, or the ones that succeeded, and the others we just kind of sweep under the rug. And that you're not changing the culture by doing that. You're teaching people that actually, like, this is lip service. This is what goes in like an employee newsletter, and people got gift cards for doing it, but nothing actually happened. And you're just kind of reinforcing that it is the same old, same old.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about InsurTech days or day. Is it just one? How do you get in as an InsurTech? Like what do you use to decide who comes? And then internally, who are they getting in front of? How do you make something like that successful?
Yeah. I got to tell you, Bryan, I think that's a really good question. When I first kicked off the first InsurTech day, initially it was based on just some of the relationships that I had in the InsurTech space, and my connections in the space goes pretty deep, right? So originally I brought InsurTechs into the organization, and we did two tracks, right? The first track was specifically with the executive leadership team, right? Because, as I mentioned, part of changing the culture is making sure that those that are responsible for driving strategy in the organization really believes and understands those things that's happening in the company and that's happening in the industry, or things that's happening in the industry that can influence the company, right? So that was one of the tracks, is to make sure that they can get into in front of the executive leadership all the way up to our CEO. So that way they can have discussions with these InsurTechs, and ask direct questions. Okay, well, is this happening? Is that happening? How do you think it's going to impact the company? And then the other thing was to have an open day, not only like a demo day, but an opportunity for people to come in, talk to the InsurTech, for them to do a demo day, right, where they're talking about the capabilities that they have, really helping folks understand the value of the capability that they bring to the table, right? So that was the first InsurTech day, really to get people starting to understand that concept of innovation and transformation in the insurance industry. The second InsurTech day was a little bit different, because at that point, then we started to really focus our attention on things that's actually occurring in the industry that we started to bring into our organization, right? So, for example, for the second InsurTech day, we brought in a distribution partner that helped us to build our digital distribution capability, Talage. into the organization, and Adam and his team, really to talk about, okay, well, hey, last year you learned about what's happening from a digital distribution perspective. This year we're working with AF Group to build this digital distribution capability. So that way, with that capability being built, people can see firsthand, what they heard in the marketplace, but then see it applied to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis in AF Group, and how that's going to be applicable to the transformation that we're seeing in our business.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's sort of the difference. And then, as we started looking at the future, it's really been more focused on those things that we're already doing to transform our organization, right? So bringing in texting capabilities and letting people understand what those capabilities represent, for example, all the way through to, leveraging third-party data to streamline the underwriting process. So that way underwriters can get information that's out there in the ethosphere and see how it's truly impactful to their day-to-day business, all the way through to, I mentioned the third-party data texting and partnering with organizations that we would bring in to leverage artificial intelligence with those cognitive capabilities to help us with trending of the claims text that the claims adjusters are putting into their systems, right? So it's really looking at those real life scenarios that people can align with on a day-to-day basis based on the work that we're doing. So then really they can appreciate what's happening in the industry, but know that it's having a real impact on their work day to day.
I could keep you here for like 3 more hours, but I'm going to respect your time. I do want to ask you about kind of where things are headed, given everything that you've seen on the innovation side, thinking about transforming a business and broadening it out. Where's this industry heading? Like, what's going to be really front and center important for us moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question, right? And I always, when I look at this, I always break it down in a couple of ways, right? I think we have to look at the market of the future, the delivery of the future, and then also what I would call sort of the distribution of the future as well, right? So, when we look at the future of insurance, I also always sort of take insurance out of the equation, right? So when we think about the market of the future, we see things like increased globalization, that's wind up playing out. We see a lot of socio-political and socioeconomic issues that are impacting just the general way that people sort of engage in the broader market that's outside of insurance. And we also see things like lifestyle change and lifestyle demand that's driving people to look differently about how they do their work on a day-to-day basis, right? So, years ago, you saw organizations like Lyft and Uber come into play, but then as soon as the pandemic hit, all of a sudden everybody was getting their food delivered to them from things like DoorDash, for example, or Uber Eats, or
like shadow kitchens or whatever, like restaurants.
Exactly. And those are different exposures than what we've seen play out at the scale that we've seen it occur over the last 2 years. And it's really become much more ubiquitous in the last 2 years than what we've seen, right? So that means that as an insurance organization, those things that have nothing to do with insurance, you have to be able to figure out, okay, well, what are the levers that we need to put in place in order to drive things like digital enablement that's going to help us to interplay in that space based on the, what we've been seeing as a part of the market of the future. It's the same thing when we talk about the distribution of the future, right? Well, what we have to do is figure out, okay, well, the customer expectation is changing. Customers are looking for us to deliver or distribute their insurance and the service model, through different capabilities, right? So how do we make sure that we meet the customers in their channel of choice? And how can insurance companies ensure that we're providing that channel of choice for customers to meet? Otherwise, you might wind up edging out a customer that's looking to get things in a certain way that you're no longer able to support. And you may find out, a couple of years down the line that way is becoming a little bit more ubiquitous. And with you not being able to provide that capability, those players that had the foresight is going to wind up leading in that space where you're not going to be able to innovate quick enough in order to support that, right? And it's the same thing as I mentioned of, that delivery of the future and what that means, right? Where we think about, well, not only how we're going to deliver it, right? But hey, should we think about enabling customers to be able to pick up their product or capability or service model in a channel that is product agnostic, right? So whether or not I like to use the notion that, if we go out and if I buy a car, I want to make sure that I can buy the car. Me being in the insurance industry, I always think about, well, hey, I got to buy insurance for that car. But a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old that's driving first, all they're worried about is the car, right? That insurance becomes secondary, or they'll get put on their parents' insurance, right? So frankly, there are ways to say, okay, well, we can make this product of insurance somewhat channel agnostic, right? So maybe they're paying their car payment, but on top of that, they're getting the insurance to come along with that car payment. So they don't have to think about it, right? It's just a part of what's coming along, and we're starting to see more and more of that, right? Thinking about whether or not we want to look at the industry as sort of the old GM distribution model, if you want to use sort of a car analogy, right? The old distribution model that you tend to get from like GM, Ford, and Chrysler, some of those older organizations, or do we really want to look at it from more of the digital perspective and still be able to deliver that car to a driver, but do it in a way that's more digitally enabled, that's more based on the new customer experience, like an organization like Carvana is doing, right? That's really, taking the friction out of the process and being able to, purchase the car and making that purchase of a car more extremely easy than the way that it was done in the past, right? So that's the way that, as we look at sort of the future of that's the way that I see the future of the industry going, right? Sort of in those three channels, figure out how do you make it a little bit easier to really drive those capabilities of, delivery, distribution, and those things in the future,
Yeah. So I'm looking at selling my car right now. And I'm pricing out through Carvana, and then I'm also trying my local dealer. I'm utterly blown away by Carvana. It's been amazing. And the dealer still won't tell me anything after 2 days. And Carvana, instantly, here's this much money, texting. And it's clearly an AI I'm texting with, but it's really good. I am I hope the dealer comes back with a terrible offer, even though it would actually be easier to sell it to them, just because I'm blown away.
And that's the thing, right? Carvana removed the friction out of the process, and they got to you it sounds like almost immediately, right? Without having to wait the extra couple of days.
I had an offer in 35 seconds.
Exactly. So think about people that don't have a lot of time, people that want to get the transaction done more quickly. What are they going to wait for? Are they going to wait for the deal, or are they going to go to Carvana? Now, I know you're waiting, of course, right? But I think a lot of people will want to go with where there's less friction and where there's ease of getting the transaction done,
The only reason I'm waiting is because I might get something else. I'm trying to debate if I downsize or replace my car with something else. But and so I need the dealer for that, because Carvana didn't have anything that fit my needs. But anyway, it's a whole other discussion. But it's unreal. Just that difference in experience. And I know it's a different industry, but what can we take from that? What can we take
exactly.
It's awesome. Yeah, Abel, I could keep you for 3 more hours, and we'd already done 20 minutes before we started recording. So I'm going to let you go, but thank you for this. It's great to sit down with you again, and hopefully we get to see each other live and in person soon enough.
Yeah, Bryan, thanks again for the opportunity. This is what I love talking about, especially if there's, some value that anyone can glean from it, really to help this industry, So again, you're right. Hopefully we can see each other in person. For me, I'm going to be at a couple of in-person events, in the future, the Dig In, of course, ITC later this year, the InsurTech Hartford symposium that's going to be coming around soon as well. But if you're at any of those, we should definitely try to grab a coffee.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. Thank you for sitting down and kicking off season 3 for me, the first episode of the new season. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryan. I appreciate it as well.
Hey, thank you so much to Abel for taking time out of his incredibly busy schedule to sit down and talk with me for a bit. I've been trying to make this happen for a little while, but the timing was perfect to kick off the new season with Abel. I feel like if you want to have a major player from the carrier side in the innovation space that's so well known, who better than Abel Travis, right? So great to sit down with Abel, who I'm really thankful that I've gotten time with him before. He's brilliant. If you haven't heard him talk, you absolutely should watch for Abel where he's appearing at places or in a webinar or a panel, or you just get a chance to learn from the guy. And as you could catch, he's got a lot of brilliant ideas and he fires them off. That was a pretty rapid fire kind of interview that's super valuable. So thank you to Abel. thank you to the team at AF Group and at Fundamental Underwriters for giving him up for a little bit of time. And hopefully you all took some real value in that. It's interesting to me, given all the different perspective he brings from working at different carriers, but also, monoline comp carrier, trying to shift into new lines, being in the commercial line space. And so much of the innovation is focused on personal lines. And he's really trying to say, well, how can we bring it to some of these other spaces and round out our experience and our losses and our book development as a formerly monoline carrier as we think about surviving for the long term. He's thinking in centuries. That's the whole point of this industry. So thanks again to Abel. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. I will be back next week with another great episode, another great interview to keep us all moving ahead, challenging, thinking critically about where the future of insurance is heading. I hope that you all come back next time. Thank you.